Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 41 of the Beer Enthusiasts. This is our recap episode. We just got back last week, so we're recording this on Sunday, November 9th. We got back on Wednesday of last week from taking the Master Cicerone Exam for the second time. And just like we did last year, we're going to kind of recap everything, and it's going to be a lot. Some stuff will be similar, but we'll just slight spoiler alert. Attempt 2 is far different from attempt 1, not just the the questions.
Yes, yes, and this also helps explain our absence a little bit because we
Yeah,
we did a lot of video preparation a while back, but then once it gets down to the last little bit before the exam, we were really zoned in. So trying to get as ready as possible for attempt number 2 with all the intention of the world of it being the final attempt, but that remains to be seen. We'll get to that. So,
yeah.
did you bring a beer?
Yes, I did. Yeah, I'm drinking Irresistible. It's a German style pilsner from Everywhere Beer
Very
Company. They
cool.
hooked us up with some cans. So,
I
oh,
uh,
nice.
I went to
Yep.
snag some Jubilee,
I
one
was
of my
gonna say one of
seasonal
your.
faves.
I was gonna say one of your faves. So,
Always delicious in my Brave Noise glass.
yep. Yeah. So we thought maybe a good way to kind of keep us on track would just be to talk about the day that we got there, what decisions we made to prepare in the days leading up. Why did we fly out on a Friday when so many people arrive on Sunday or a different day? But we flew to Kansas City on Friday. Got into the airport, close enough when we just shared a ride to get to the Airbnb, and right after that, you kind of have the decision of, do you want to try and take a tour of the brewery at some point? We did that last year. So we didn't want to do the full, kind of immersive 2 hour thing. So we tried to see if we could just, peek into a couple of places. But essentially, the goal that was, I think, different from last year, because I don't think we necessarily did this. But we just basically got to the Airbnb and then just like left and went straight to Boulevard, and the goal was just to drink beers.
Yeah, we really wanted to taste everything strange and different and funky
Right.
and cool at Boulevard, both because we get very little Boulevard in Southern California, and also just there's a possibility some of their beers could be on the exam somewhere or whatever, and you want to
Right.
prepare for some of the quirkier stuff. So yeah, we went straight there, and it was actually really really nice because the first person we saw was our buddy Carl, who is one of the tasting room leads for Boulevard, and I always tease that he's like our babysitter during the exam. He kind of like hangs out with us in the common area and triple checks that we're not talking about beer or whatever in between oral exams. And so he's kind of good friend slash maybe mole or snitch for the program. It's hard to say, but he was the first person we saw, and he was like, "Yeah, I know why these guys are here. They need to taste a bunch of stuff." And so he got us set up with a bunch of flights of. We tasted some just like new normal stuff too. Like they have a
Yeah.
new year-round dry Irish stout that was super nice, and but all manner of barrel aged beers,
Yeah.
and we also got some food. Long travel day. That was Halloween, by the way. Highly recommend traveling on Halloween. Basically, nobody was flying, so if you're not a super Halloween dork, you can travel on Halloween, and it'll be great. But we didn't want to get in any later than Saturday, basically. So Friday seemed like a good midpoint. We had gotten in last year the Thursday before the exam, so that we could do the Friday morning tour that Scott mentioned. But having had already done that, didn't feel like that was absolutely necessary. Had a little bit of familiarity with the campus and the brew house, and a couple of oral exams end up being in the brew house, and we felt fine about that. Not like we needed the full tour, like you said. And so yeah, we just needed food. We needed beer. We needed beer research. And after tasting all the things we felt like we needed to taste at Boulevard, which, by the way, super delicious stuff they're doing there. So if you get to Kansas City, support them, please. are maintaining they have to be maintaining one of the bigger barrel aging programs in the country. All kinds of interesting barrels, rum barrel stuff, wine barrel stuff, bourbon
Yep.
barrel stuff, and
Solera.
yeah, so sprinkle in a little Solera method and different pastry type stuff, and yeah, that was really really fun. And
Yeah, and
then
I think another thing that's for people to kind of consider. Obviously, this isn't like a hack or anything, but it's just always a good idea if you're taking a tasting exam, thinking about what time of year it is. Because some styles might just be fresher than others. I think that's can be one of the challenges with having the master exam kind of in the fall is that you're kind of right around winter ale, winter beers. You're right around fest beer isn't that it's Oktoberfest wasn't that long ago, and so stuff like that is still fresh enough.
fresh hop.
Yeah, fresh hop stuff, so there's just pumpkin beers, that kind
Mhm.
of season. So there's just a lot going on kind of in the fall and just kind of seasonally in the beer world. And also Boulevard just does almost all of those things, in some fashion. I think even one of the beers we tried was their winter ale with fresh hops. They
Yeah,
like combined two together. So yeah, I mean that's just the kind of the breadth of the kind of stuff that they have. And we were also hoping to they had come out with a new light lager, and so we just really wanted to pick up some of that for base beer because we're always just trying to support the place that's hosting the exam. We weren't able to kind of get as much as we wanted there, so we had to go somewhere else. But tried lots of really good stuff. Carl hooked us up, let us kind of build our own flights, which was nice. And then basically we were talking through the beers as we're tasting, but then kind of thinking about what are we going to study for the rest of the night, and then what's the plan for for the next day.
yeah. And we did sneak in a beer run that night. We went
Yeah,
to the nearest Total Wine because we stayed at a different Airbnb this time. Last year we had the luxury of staying essentially across the street from a decent liquor store, and this year we were in a new spot and not that closer to Boulevard, but not close to the magical liquor store. And so we did a Total Wine run and grab some things that either we can't get in Southern California, or your spidey senses are tingling a little bit. It's like, let's snag some of those aforementioned winter ales and maybe some
yeah,
other commercial examples we don't see as
yeah.
often. And so
Or you walk around and you see, wow, this is in cans now. Oh, okay,
yeah,
interesting.
yeah,
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 interesting. Okay, we
yep,
didn't know this was getting distroed in cans. So yeah, you start to kind of get an idea of what Again, it shouldn't be go to the Total Wine closest to the exam and just be like, this is what they have to pick from. Like that's the worst possible thing you can do.
yeah,
But it's not terrible to because one of the things that and I think it happened to both of us on the exam too for the style portion. Sometimes there's just you hear the answer and you're just like, that never even crossed my mind.
right.
Didn't not even a hint of oh, it could be that. And so it's just always helpful to kind of refresh what's because there's as people who watch this know, there's just so much beer out there, and so it's just always good to get little reminders.
Yeah, you can't game it at all. There's just too much beer available. So, but it is, I mean, even if you're not going to buy a bunch of beer to taste, just taking a lap through something like the local Total Wine is going to trigger your memory on some stuff, and just having it somewhere in the deep recesses of your mind could be important for the exam. So yeah, highly recommend it, even if you don't buy a bunch of beer, to just check it out. Just take it for what it's worth, like, and small spoiler alert, but last year that proved more valuable than this year. Last year we ended up buying a couple of things that ended up being on the exam. This year that didn't really happen. So it's a little bit of a crapshoot, but that's okay. You're still learning and figuring out stuff about the beers anyway, so it's all good. But that's sweet. Yeah, that was funny enough. It's Halloween night, and we go on this beer run, and so everybody's in costumes except us, and everyone's doing their like legitimate beer run, not their super beer nerd beer run. Um, and yeah, pick up those beers at Total Wine, and just got back to the Airbnb, and like you said, started strategizing for the next couple of days before the exam. And we had a general plan, right? We're really big fans of letting the Saturday before, so 2 days before go time, be the majority of our tasting. So we brought our off flavor spikes and we plan to do those, and maybe some commercial example tasting, some other practice panels, and essentially do the bulk of the tasting, the last minute tasting that we wanted to do. And that is in part because we didn't really want to do any tasting on Sunday. We wanted to get some other stuff done on on Sunday instead of studying, or instead of tasting, and not just because there's lots of like book learning and flashcard and essay and oral practice type stuff that we needed to do, but also just it's nice to have, like, I don't really believe in detox per se, but just nice to have a full day of a clear gut before the exam. So yes, Saturday was tasting day.
Yeah, so we we reached out to folks who we knew who were taking the exam. If anybody could come, we try to gather as many folks as we can to, because we're going to have leftovers of the spikes anyway. So we had somebody take us up on that. We did some tasting, and then I think the three things we really focused on from Friday night when we got back, later on Saturday, because we kind of like, we also were not like studying or tasting like late into the night on Saturday. We kind of like to start in the early afternoon and then kind of be done before dinner. But I mean, really, our big priorities were just going through everything in cellarmanship, just to kind of double check on cask stuff, because that was a weak point for myself, especially last year. And then also just kind of walking through the draft quality manual, and just kind of, again, kind of reiterating some stuff and walking through and thinking, okay, if they were going to ask us a question about this, how could, what are some things we could compare it to? We're always trying to just figure out what are some creative ways to think about, those particular subjects. And the other thing we did last year too, that we did again this year that I think was great, was we just go through all of the flavor compounds that are in the syllabus, just to kind of double check through all of those, because those are just kind of easy to sprinkle in, somewhere else. You can just say, oh, here's this, method that you use for keeping and serving. If something goes wrong, what are the off flavors that are usually associated with it? So for like your level 2, the stuff that you learn early on, it's like, you associate, when you talk about line cleaning, you talk about diacetyl and acetic acid, because that's something that happens when you don't do that correctly or often enough. And so that's just, those things are often connected in some way. And they do that with lots of things. You can essentially take anything and they could just say, tell me about a commercial example that exemplifies that thing, that service method, that style that goes with that food. It's just relatively easy for it to be spread across. And I think that's a great way to do the exam. I think just knowing that there could just be a little inkling of, from any section and any oral or essay that you get, I think really is what makes the exam challenging, and really tests kind of how well-rounded you are. That's why whenever we hear people say, I'm kind of thinking I'm not really going to study this or do this unless it is a hyper-specific thing, and you're just hoping that they don't ask about it, that's great. But if it is just like a very general thing, and it's like, if you're just commercial examples are kind of like, I'm not really feeling it this year. It's like, well, it's not just going to be on like a, on a style, oral exam or something.
If you want to gamble, not study like Sati or whatever, that's fine.
We'll sign up on that.
But if you're like, I don't know how much of the flavor and evaluation is going to be on the exam, and it's like, oh, it's pretty much like in every question. So
So we did that. We kind of walked through, and it's always great because there's always something Chris remembers to reiterate. It's often for keeping and serving or something I don't understand, and I'm gone super granular for the off flavor stuff, for sometimes for better or worse. Like there's even sometimes where I'm like, I actually should have just read all of these to Chris first, because I'm telling him these and I'm realizing like this last one I'm just not going to tell him because it's too much. Like, this is not going to be, because I was like, I'm going to read this to you and you can choose whether or not you want to, and I get it if you don't. Like, it's probably not one of the major bullet points that they're that they're looking for. So that's always good. I think there's like a good kind of balance that we bring to each other, and we help to fill in a lot of gaps, and have some different just interests too are different. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I always find to be really helpful when we do that.
Yeah, totally agreed. And there's also a practical reason that we went over on that Saturday night, more of the keeping and serving type stuff, because we do get our schedule and the format. Well, the format's always the same, but depending on
Right.
how many people sign up for the exam, they might change like when you take your oral exams versus when you do your essays or whatever. But luckily for us, I think quite a nice little comfort advantage was the schedule was identical to
Mm-hmm.
last year. So all the like guesswork or getting used to a new type of timing or paying attention, we didn't have to deal with any of that. But in terms of knowledge area, it's important to know that they split it up, and I noticed they do this on advanced as well, where the stuff that's a little bit easier to cram for, like the procedural things like keeping and serving, where there's lots of SOPs essentially, like 5 to 10 steps of how to do something that you could cram for if you knew it was coming. They're not going to leave those for day 2 and then give you the whole evening the night before to study those. It's often that the day 2 stuff is the other knowledge areas that are just so vast that there's not a particular thing that you can cram for. And so, yeah, we wanted to do more of the keeping and serving as early as we could, because we knew that those were the essays that were coming on Monday, among the 8 that we got that day. The oral exams are sprinkled all over the 2 days, so those are a little bit less predictable. But yeah, and that's what we kind of went over Saturday night, and then Sunday was kind of the rest of the study day, and I really do think it was very like mutually constitutive. There are some things that I have a little bit more of a knack for versus you, and then vice versa, that we can really fill in the holes for each other, or even just like explain in a way that makes a little bit more immediate sense, whether it's via metaphor or just that 4th or 5th bullet point that we can add to a potential essay, or also just good reminders for like if we do this a lot where we'll be on a topic, just say it's we're talking ethyl hexanoate, and we're just like, what's the chemical pathway of this compound? And if we're asked about it, what do we need to remember to say? What styles is it appropriate in? Like make sure it bleeds into all the different knowledge areas. And so, yeah, Sunday was that kind of big day for walking through all of the flavor compounds on the Master Cicerone syllabus, remembering their pathways, how they're created, how you fix them, how you change the amounts of them in the finished beer, where they're desirable, where they're not desirable, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a lot, because there are some quote unquote easy ones, they're not easy in a vacuum. They're easy because they've been on every version of the exam since the beginning of your Cicerone journey, so you just know more about it. Don't confuse being well studied with making it easier. But there are 29 off flavors that can just show up on the tasting exam, and then there's a bunch more listed in the flavor and evaluation section of the syllabus. And so I don't even know what that total number is off the top of my head, but it's we're going through like 50 flavor compounds on Sunday, the day before the exam, and just making sure that we've got all of our ducks in a row. We already have our notes and everything, but it's just kind of the last moment, and we didn't feel like super time pressed or anything, but the last full day to just lock everything in, right? And even stuff that we know, like the back of our hand, maybe we are going over that and just saying, okay, how are they going to ask about this? Is this going to be part of a larger question about flavor compounds, or is this going to be part of a style essay? And you don't know specifically, but it just situates you mentally to be able to answer that, to be able to use that flavor compound in this example as an answer to a lot of different stuff on the exam. And so I think that's valuable. It just makes you a little bit more of a Swiss Army knife going into into the day, and just a good refresher. And so we did hold back some non-alcoholic beers to taste. Non-alcoholic beers, one of the things they added to the syllabus, and everything that they added to the syllabus, we wanted to be in tip-top shape on. And obviously not worried about the alcohol consumption when you're drinking non-alcoholic beer, so we didn't really care when we tasted those. And that felt good. I don't know. Tell the folks how you felt, but that Sunday last year felt way more out of control. Just like we couldn't possibly study enough stuff. And this year, to me, it just felt like, oh no, we're just like dotting our I's, crossing our T's. Maybe there were like a couple small freak out moments, but it was just nothing like the year before, I thought.
No, it really wasn't. And I realized that especially going through the flavor compounds, because as we're going through them, there were literally parts of it where I was like, oh, I remember when we were going through whatever it was, and you or Charlie said, oh, well, I read this here. And I was like, I don't have that in my notes. And so all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, I remember when I added this thing because, it was missing from last year. And this, it was literally just like, let's just run through what we've already got. We haven't, learned anything, realized we hadn't picked up anything new or random for any of the compounds. And so, yeah, it just kind of felt really good. And I think to your point, I think things are often seen, whether it's compounds or whether it's, pieces of draft equipment. Some of those things are maybe seen as easy on the surface, but when you need to explain them in great detail or using technical terms, how often do we really, talk about, obviously the one that comes to mind when everyone's like, what's the easy one? Whether it's the tasting panel or just describing it as light struck. Like everybody's just like, oh, if you get light struck on your tasting exam, you're like pumping your fist. Like it's usually pretty easy for the vast majority of people to, and they know what that's like and have experienced it. And they think, oh yeah, I've explained light struck to, everybody. And, but have you explained it, or have you, kind of worked with the material to the extent that the exam requires of you? And that was something we definitely had, last year, not compound related, but a different one. And we just walked in and we were like, yeah, this is quite simple, but if you haven't really, spent some time here, like there's a lot of places to trip up. And, and I didn't get a great score on that oral exam last year. And, so we were going to not really make that mistake again. We were not going to say, oh, they're not really going to ask us about this. It doesn't seem like this is, worthy of the master exam or whatever
Right.
you want to call it. And I think that definitely paid off. I don't know if there was necessarily anything like that this year, but yeah, I think we just felt more comfortable kind of knowing that we weren't kind of having that sort of attitude, and we had done it the year before. And uh, yeah, and just the fact that you've taken it once, like you said, in the same place. So at that point, the thing we're up to this point, what we're really thinking about is, our understanding is that there's going to be like a similar sized cohort going
Right.
into the exam. We're always, oh, Dan, is it going to be the same as last year? And, we're asking them at the sensory course in Atlanta, and, oh yeah, people are signing up, and, I don't know what the number is, but seems like it could be, similar or whatever. And, we're, and especially after last year where people just walk into the room and we're just like, who are you? And how do we not know who you are? Like, why did you hide this? And so we're kind of excited. We're like, okay, who are the people that come in? We're close enough to the exam site that we walked the morning of, which was great. Kind of got to get, it's cold in the morning. It was cold in the morning there. So as Chris said, just kind of like a nice wake you up cold shower kind of effect, and get the blood flowing. And we get there, and it's the three of us and a couple of people who we knew were going to be, three other people who we knew were, or four other people who we knew, were going to be, taking it. One person who we had heard of, but we hadn't really, met them before. And so we're like, all right, everybody's who we know of is here. So like, who's going to walk in the door? And Neil goes, all right, everybody's here. Let's get started. And we're like,
Yeah.
so there was only 7 people in the cohort. And one of them who we had thought was going to be there, a friend of his that he studies with, kind of let us know, life kind of got real busy. And so he decided to skip it this year, but hopefully he's going to attempt it next year. But yeah, definitely a much smaller cohort than last year. So that was kind of surprising.
Yeah, last year was 11, this year was 7, and the number of examinees in years past leading up to this seem to have hovered around between 11 and 13 for a few years. And part of that is like everybody's still getting their groove post COVID, and it's not the heyday necessarily of both. Now you have to pass advanced first, so people are trying to level up to level 3 before they can go for level 4. So there's not a big wait list or backlog or lottery or anything. And other people probably, we heard murmurs of other people that might take the exam and they didn't end up being there, and so maybe they're just biding their time, waiting an extra year. No, we made that argument last year when we talked about this, about how we could have signed up for the 2023 exam, but that felt a little bit too early, and so maybe other folks are just biding their time, which is fine. And I recommend that if you don't have the money to just waste on a fact-finding mission for your first attempt at the exam. So yeah, only 7, which was actually kind of nice in so many respects. It meant that everybody's schedule was pretty similar. There were 7 proctors and 7 examinees, so we had essentially a 1-to-1 student-teacher ratio, and it meant everything was went pretty quick and was compact and very, tons of camaraderie. There was only one person that we didn't kind of know that much, and so kind of getting them into the group and trying to ease the tension, and felt similar to the year before, which it was just a good group, a good smart group, and very comfortable group. And yeah, it's it's Monday morning at this point. We've locked in. There are 7 people, and oral exams start at 8 a.m. We learn who our proctors are that morning too. They want us to be there at 7:15 in the morning that first day to just sign some paperwork, and sign some paperwork and get settled in, make sure you're in the right spot, and all of that. But they keep under tight wraps who's going to be proctoring. You sort of know that like Dan and Jason, the directors of the program, are going to be there, and it's in Neil Whitty's hometown, so he's going to be there, and we're certain that Jen Blair is going to be there. But there's like these other potential proctors that, last year we had Avery Swanson proctor some oral exams for us, and she's getting ready to open Keeping Together in New Mexico. And we're like, so she's probably not going to be there, and it's just like waiting on pins and needles to see like who shows up. Is it going to be somebody we know? Is it going to inform what they ask us about?
And Randy Mosher wasn't there last year, so we were like, well, like Ray's, kind of done, with the program now and sold it to Dan and Jason. Does that mean Randy's kind of done, proctoring? But he's got his book coming out, and so is he going to be back? Is he going to be doing it next year? And and the proctors that we had, it was cool. It was very cool to see who we had. So
it was super cool. And so your mind, you meet them, and okay, so backing up just a tad, 7:15 a.m. is 5:15 a.m. where we live, so that was important to get in early and try to acclimate to the time change as much as possible, so you didn't feel like just a walking zombie at that point in the morning.
We did get to fall back though. That was the key thing. From Saturday to Sunday, we got to fall back, I think, and that was huge. That I think really, 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 really helped.
Yep, just that extra hour of sleep was very clutch, I thought. And yeah, so oral exams start at 8 a.m. And there's a funny moment where it's kind of the first big oh shit moment of attempt 1 was that first oral exam, and I found myself in this room doing a keeping and serving, like, troubleshooting oral exam. And it was just like, oh, everything Chris Crow has just left the building, and you are just a scarecrow at this moment, and you know nothing. And we talked about how, nerve wracking that was. And it's like, I swear I know about this stuff. It just did not come to me in the moment. And so I'm walking to my first one, and it's an oral exam with Neil. And just fun little insider story. He said, "Hey, keeping and serving first again," or whatever.
Yeah,
And so
they
he,
yeah. Oh,
I'm sure they're watching the exam recaps and stuff when they can. They're busy folks, but yeah. So it was pretty funny to have that sort of from the jump again. But I tell you what, night and day. Felt so much better. I mean, such a large percentage of it is just no first time jitters. That just was not there. There's still just this. There's obviously nervous energy. You don't know exactly what that first oral exam is going to be. You don't know exactly what any of them are going to be. And it's still swirling in your mind. What if they ask something I didn't study that much, or this and that? But all of those thoughts were less intense, and just felt pretty comfortable. First one went well, as opposed to last year where our first one sucked. And so, yeah, got off on a good start. We both had a schedule where we were doing an oral exam for 15 minutes and then a break for 15 minutes. And we did our literally half of the oral exams on morning one, kind of in a 3-hour block spread out, before a couple of tasting panels. And I we've already started talking about, what we think we may have scored on some things, but that just felt like such a good start to the exam this year. Obviously, very nitpicky things and small stuff we're thinking about that we could have said here and there, but honestly, I think, that I sustained a very high average on the oral exams, and so that's just a good start to the show. Good start to the show. Did you feel any
yeah.
different energies, or getting
Yeah,
ready?
absolutely. No, absolutely. And especially getting, again, a familiar proctor. Mine was not keeping and serving, mine was beer and food pairing, which, was something for, in terms of, oral exams last year, I did really well on. And so it was good to do that, kind of know a little bit about, just kind of what I was getting into. And then I think I had either it was either keeping and serving right after that, or styles, and whatever. But basically, first three, it was like, okay, got the beer and food. Thought that went well enough. I didn't think I got like I don't think I was in the like mid to high 90s or anything, but felt very similar to last year. So felt like I got there on that. And then same thing, kind of walked into the room. Neil's asking how it's going. I of course borrowed your joke and said I've kind of got the keeping and serving sweats right now. So and he thought that was pretty funny. And but again, compared to last year, where I just kind of felt just kind of like I was scrambling and just everything was just a blur. A lot more comfortable. It had a little bit more of a plan for, okay, this is how I'm gonna attack most troubleshooting scenarios, and kind of start there. And if there's anything kind of different, and um, the proctors are a little bit different in how they handle some of the different oral exams. And they just not they're not all the same. Some of them are a little bit more stoic than others. Some of them are a little bit more talkative, or so you never quite know what part they're saying or not saying is going to be kind of held against you, or if you're but I mean, if you're just talking about the final result compared to last year, yeah, night and day. And so getting that one off my plate was pretty big, and getting to do that. I don't necessarily know if I got 100 on it or anything, but definitely not this shouldn't be the same score that I got last year. And for me, the difference was that there's really just one section where it's like, if keeping and serving for the oral exams that first day just went poorly, the pressure to do better on the next ones are just going to build even more.
Hmm.
because I didn't really need to make up points in styles or the tasting exam or flavor compounds or beer flavor, and just had to sprinkle in a couple of extra percentage points for 2 to 3 for beer and food pairing and for process. So really it was like keeping and serving was the path, and so to start on that was really great. Um, yeah, and then styles, I thought that first day went really well. My other process one, my process and ingredient one, wasn't super happy. Didn't bomb it, but again, like you said, just some nitpicky things, and you're always they tell you in there, they say don't worry about what I'm writing or what I'm not writing or what I say or what I don't say, but it's still it's still very hard not to read into
Right.
not to read into stuff. And I'm sure there are proctors who I'm sure they go and say stuff and say like, oh, I kind of wish I wouldn't have said this thing because maybe I gave them the wrong impression that they did a certain way on it, or maybe they don't. Maybe I imagine that we imagine what the proctors do and how they are at the lunch table or whatever with each other, but they're all really good friends, so they're probably just shooting the shit anyway and are not
Hmm.
like talking about us. That's probably an over exaggeration, but yeah, overall with everything else, felt like that day went a lot better than day one last year, and so I was pretty happy with the oral exams that first day. Yeah.
Agreed. And then, yeah, identical schedule to last year, and they tell you which tasting panels you're doing as they come up to. So right after the oral exam set on day one is two tasting panels, an off flavor tasting panel, which is the one where you've got eight beers and they're all spiked with a single spike, and you just got to get the spike. And then the second one, this is all just before lunch, is the consumer friendly description panel. That one's always super fun because it's two beers. You feel like you have a lot of time and you're not supposed to use hyper technical jargon, and you're just trying to be accurate and explain the beer in evocative and specific terms that a consumer might like to read on a label or something like that. And it's only 25 to 75 words per beer, so you're a little bit limited there. So there's a little moment to breathe for a tasting panel. You kind of like smell it, taste it, write down a couple of
Yep.
flavor and aroma notes, and then write your blurb. Um,
Oh, also
you know,
speaking of something we did different compared to last year, we checked with Cicerone and we brought our own kitchen timers for the tasting portion and for the essays. So it was, as
yeah.
long as it had like a silent mode or whatever, and it's just simple kitchen timer. It's just nice to be able to look at the 15 minutes that are that you have left. And Neil does a good job. He says when 5 minutes have passed, 10 minutes, and
Mhm.
when you're kind of starting to wrap up. But even when we've just done it with people, and it's like 3 or 4 minutes have passed, once you kind of start tasting it and you realize you haven't thought about the time, you're just like, how much has actually passed? And
Mhm.
sometimes people who were practicing with, they're like, how much time is left? And it's like, oh, there's still like 9.5 minutes. Like you're
Yeah.
you're doing just like you're doing fine. Like,
Yeah.
so that was a really nice change that we did from last year. That was small, but I felt like really, again, anything that can kind of help to calm any nerves. I think I think those are super important. Um, and then we did lunch. Lunch was awesome. Then we and then we came back, and then it's essays.
Mhm.
And like Chris said, first day is a lot of keeping and serving styles. And how did you feel compared to last year? I mean, because this was a day where we had lots of feelings after after this
Yeah,
day.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, just so much better, right? So last year we answered some essay questions and ended up with poor scores on them, in where it just felt like we weren't entirely sure exactly what was being asked of us, which is kind of a strange feeling. You're just sitting there with a, 2 to 4 sub-pointed question. You think it would be super easy, and I think the point is you need to err on the side of more granularity rather than less. And yeah, the keeping and serving essays, they're always like two that are kind of more equipment related, um, or yeah, equipment or setup related, and then two that are more about like balancing a draft system, or figuring out an appropriate gas blend or something like that. And those are the ones where you try to save some time on if you can, because it's kind of like you either balance the system or you don't, right? So you're going to get a high score or some middling score, even if you have pieces that are correct and not correct. But um, and last year, neither of us experienced that time boost or that time saving. It just felt like those took forever, for whatever reason, whether they were more complicated or we were just more, trembling or what, it could have been anything. But we made it a point to be more prepared for those this year, and I think that paid dividends. 3 of the 4 keeping and serving essays, I felt like I saved a ton of time on. I got to bank a lot of time, and then one of the kind of balancing ones was a little bit more complicated than I anticipated, but I still got to the second half of the essays. So there's 8. There you have 3 hours to do 8. So I got to the last 4 with more than half of the time, about 16 minutes more than half the time. So I did bank some time at least, which is great, because then you're going into styles and you have 4 style essays, and they can be anything, right? And you may feel like some are in your wheelhouse and some are out, but there's usually one that's like asking you to explain the breadth of one style. There's one that asks you to compare 2 to 3 styles. There's one that's like a more general set of styles rather than a very specific one. And that's just our experience. They could do any number of those things, but it is always 4 beer style essays at that point. And we got a couple that are a little bit more in our wheelhouse, hopefully. So that was extremely nice. The only drawback being you feel like you could write about that for forever, so you sink a little bit of extra time into something where maybe you'd hope to be a little more machine like about it, but that's okay. Had my little bit of extra time, and I felt like I could have written for another hour, if it was given to me, but answered everything, generally felt comfortable. You're always lamenting the little things that you wish you would have put. I mean, there's just so much about styles. I mean, if you divide the 3-hour session into 8 parts, that's 22 minutes and change for each essay. And think about writing about a beer style as vast as Weizenbach, for example, and you have to name 5 commercial examples from 3 different countries. You have to use those commercial examples to help explain the range of Weizenbach. You have to write an aroma and flavor profile of those commercial examples. And that's to say nothing of serving methods, temperatures, how to brew them, novel ingredients, novel processes, and then any little like tidbits of information that you think are like cool ass bonus points. 22 minutes, it's gone. You're not even close to being able to say all of that. So you have to pick your spots a little bit. You have to get the core of what you're being asked down, sprinkle in your extra credit type knowledge, judiciously, liberally where you can, obviously. So all that is to say, like, despite all 4 being either somewhat predicted by us or in our wheelhouse, still takes forever, and you still have to judge your time and portion out your time appropriately. So it's that part is still challenging, but I think I did like light years better on that than last year.
Yeah, time management was far different. I think I was way more knowledgeable about the first 2 keeping and serving essays, and felt like I worked my way, both quickly, but also I felt like it was pretty complete. I felt like one of the I felt like my strategy going into this was I'm going to be more prepared for the draft math stuff, but I'm not going to, I'm going to kind of go through them once, and if I've got time, and once I do that, like double checking my work is going to come after, because I'm not going to waste enough time and then think, did I just waste more time balancing this draft system, and then I still get it wrong, but then I just didn't even have time to write, and I have to leave something blank for a style that we both, really like and know really well. Like, that was not going to happen. So I did that, and then I worked my way through all the style stuff, and I still probably had, maybe 15, 20 minutes left. Went back to one of the draft balancing questions, realized I had done something incorrect, fixed my mistake, and worked through that. And then the other one, I was like, I was like, I think I've kind of figured this out. But I think the other thing too that I think we kind of knew from last year, but I think there were a couple of spots, especially on day one. I mean, on the essays, it shows you how much each of the sections that you're answering are worth, like how many points it's worth. And there was even one of the questions afterwards we were like, did you see how much that was
Yeah.
worth? Can you imagine if you didn't study that? You were
Yep.
screwed. Again, kind of going back to the beginning when you're thinking about this thing that you're just going to kind of eschew. That's not just like a very specific. You're not just like, I'm going to skew turbid mashing like very specifically. But if you're just like, oh, they're probably not going to ask about anything mashing related this year, those are two very different
Yeah.
gambles.
Yeah. Yep.
But we were like, wow, if somebody was not thinking about this, I mean, it felt like we basically it basically felt of like a free start at like a C plus,
Yeah.
written score, and it was just like, wow, like this is wild. If you are
Well,
just, I mean,
it doesn't even give anything away to say that was, I think there were three parts to that essay question,
right,
and one part was worth
yeah,
65 of 100 points.
yeah,
So, not everything that you potentially leave empty or skimp on is created equal. Like, you need to get
right.
those 65 points.
Yeah. Because again, they can take anything that, people know is on the exam and they can just give you different parameters to make it harder. You know,
Yeah.
it's just, it's like, oh, you can name a beer, it's kind of like this, like name a beer style, from Germany, name a beer style from Germany that's a lager, name a beer style that's from Germany that's a lager and can be, along this many different points of SR. They can just keep creating more and more parameters to where it's like, okay, you actually, if you just don't know, like, the two that exist or something,
Hmm.
you could be in some trouble, or maybe you'll only get a few, and you might have to take some, you might have to take like, get docked a little bit. You might be able to fill some of the parameters or not, but I mean, the fact that we had studied that, and I mean, that was the quickest 65 points.
Yeah.
It was just like boom, 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 boom. Like it was. I mean, wow. So yeah, that other part of it, I was like, oh yeah, because getting back to with the long draw thing, there was one section that was like that, and I felt like that one I was pretty confident in, and so I was going to spend some time just double checking some other stuff as opposed to trying to figure out how to get maybe a little bit more on the last 15 to 20 points of the rest of the exam. I just wanted to look over everything else and just make sure I wasn't leaving out anything super easy. Double check stuff like commercial examples or stats or anything like that people know are on the exam. It's kind of sprinkled around everywhere. But yeah, felt night and day better. Compared to last year. Then we had our last two tasting panels, which was the stop go panel and the technical portion. Which again, still the fact that they end both of the days with the technical portion is just it's just the
Uncool,
twist of
Cicerone.
it's just the twist
Uncool.
of the knife. It's just it's already there, and it's just that little extra twist. Uh, so, of course, and then in true fashion, it's the day ends. We're trying to make sure we couldn't remember if they revealed off flavor stuff or tasting exam commercial example stuff at the end. So, but once that was done, it was like, get our phones, because they have you shut off your phone. You put it in this bag, you seal it, you put your name on it so you can't carry it around with you. So we get our phones, we turn them on, and then it's just like, okay, blah, 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 like what are all the things that we got? What do we think we got on what did we talk about? What did we, all that kind of stuff. So we're just documenting the whole exam at that point, as much as we can remember. Um, yeah, and then the plan was to just go back to the Airbnb. And I'm trying to remember off the top of my head what we kind of looked through that night.
Well, so we had some of the non-alcoholic beers to taste and
Yep. Oh
try.
yeah, yeah.
So we did that because Boulevard has a couple of new ones, and non-alcoholic beer, some version of it seemed to be prime for being on the exam. And like we said, there were 3 main syllabus editions this year, so we wanted to make sure we were good on those. Um, And then um, we know that the essays for day 2 are going to be the other 3 knowledge areas, right? Anybody
Right.
that's studying for Cicerone, you know the 5 knowledge areas. You've got keeping and serving and beer styles as 2, and those we did all of our essays for those on day 1. And then so we have now ingredients and process, flavor and evaluation, and beer and food pairing. So those 3 we knew were going to be the next day. And beer and food pairing is like difficult to cram for. You've either developed some processes for that or not. You're not going to reinvent the wheel the night before you're asked about those questions. Flavor and evaluation, that's our like flavor compounds and stuff, so we could go over those a little bit more. But really tying into last year and how we changed a little bit this year, ingredients and process is that really strategic part of day 2 where you actually get 5 possible ingredients and process essay questions, and you get to skip one just from that knowledge area. So you still end up answering 8 total on the next day. But we strategized about that a little bit because some of them seem to be a little bit more standard and predictable, and the goal really had always been to not just answer the ones that are easier to answer, but that save us some time too, if possible at all. Don't pick the most intricate question to answer. And so one of my big goals was to not skip any question about water chemistry just out of pure fear, of everybody. I think you pull 1,000 Cicerones and an inordinate percentage is going to say that water chemistry is the scariest part to study. And, the couple of chemists in the corner will just laugh at us because they think it's like super easy or whatever. But last year, I basically skipped a question about water just because I was scared of talking about water. I didn't study it well enough. And so we went over a bunch of water chemistry stuff. We went back over a bunch of flavor compound stuff. We didn't like hit the book super hard or anything. We wanted to get some sleep, and spoiler alert, I slept pretty well, but you slept terribly the night before
Oh
day
man.
2.
Yeah.
So,
Oh God,
just
that
keep
was
that
real
in
bad.
mind that you don't know exactly how you're going to sleep. So don't like rig the game against yourself either and stay up until 1 o'clock in the morning
Yeah.
studying stuff, because it's much, much more important that you're healthy and alert enough to recall your long-term memory stuff than it is to cram like 3 or 4 more things in your brain the night before. So yeah, we were done chit-chatting by like 9 p.m. and then
Yeah.
we kind of retired to our separate rooms, and I think
Yeah.
went over some things independently as we tried to fall asleep.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
that
And
was
you
really
and
we did talk about what we thought would be the remaining oral exams too, which we had some
yeah,
success
because
in guessing.
right,
So
because then you know who the proctors are.
yeah,
Usually you've heard of the point is like usually you've heard of these people. Especially if you're getting this far into the Cicerone program. But that's not always the case. We
Mhm.
found out somebody had actually just kind of seen Neil around town, and they were like, "I have no idea who that guy was." Like, they could,
yeah,
so it doesn't always work out that way. But I, happened to, I had met that person before, and even meeting him on day 1, we had kind of thought like, oh, they haven't really asked us about this. And when I saw him, I was like, oh, like I'm glad we talked about that because I think that might be his wheelhouse.
yep,
So that definitely paid off a little bit. But yeah, we strategized a little bit, and we were like, oh, okay, you always want to look at all the different 4 major ingredients because that's always kind of where it's going to start. What about those ingredients? Obviously, for all of them, it's completely vast. And so, it's not just, but yeah, you're kind of thinking, okay, like what's something, maybe yeast related or hop related, but, again, they could eschew something like that. I think there are even versions of some questions they could ask that touch on multiples of those all at once. So yeah, we strategized a little bit. Who the proctors are, what do we think they're going to do tomorrow? What's something that they could do for an oral exam. Yeah, went over some water stuff, and then we really just wanted to try and get a good night's sleep. And yeah, I
yeah.
think I ended up going to sleep at 9:30, but I'm pretty sure I woke up at like 1:50 or 2 o'clock and just didn't go back to sleep.
Yeah.
So, because it's kind of hard to turn your brain off when you're doing this.
Yep.
So, but you just hope it's going to be adrenaline. It's the second day. So yeah, it's just, and you can't change it. You can't. So it's just like drink coffee and just hope that it doesn't. And I do, and I if I don't pass, there's not even an inkling of like, gosh, if I would have only slept well that
Yeah.
second night, it's not even it's not going to have anything to do with that.
Well,
Um,
and correct me if I'm wrong, but the the even bigger caffeine boost or adrenaline shot than caffeine itself or a good night's sleep is walking into an oral exam and the first thing out of their mouth is something that we talked about the night before.
oh God,
That
what a
just
rush!
there's no
What
feeling
an
like it.
There's no feeling like it. So, and it is people, it is the highest of highs. But when you come out of that oral exam and you're like, wow, I left some stuff on the table, that is the lowest of lows.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if I told you what it was, you would think, Scott, that was tailor made for you, and I can see why you were hoping it was on there. And man, I did not do as well as I would have wanted to. Just a couple of just two or three really simple mistakes. And so like Chris said, we kind of predict our scores a little bit, and I don't have a super great score on that one. So yeah, that one was definitely, it was exciting to, get to see it. And, but definitely one that it's kind of like you took a swing and you just missed the fastball down the middle. That's just
Yeah.
kind of what it was. And again, that's why even if you predict it and even if you still have to do it. And so it's
Hmm.
just doesn't make it it's not a guarantee. So yeah, we came in, we did our we had the rest of the oral exams. Yeah, I thought same for me. I think I started with I think I started with keeping and serving. I feel like no, I didn't start with keeping and serving. Um no, I think I did. Yeah, no, I think I started with keeping and serving, if memory serves. And that went fine. It wasn't my favorite oral exam I've ever done, but
Yeah. Oh, there were two
um
keeping and serving. I think you started and
right.
ended.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I started and ended with keeping and serving. So yeah, first one again kind of stepped into a little bit of like a troubleshooting scenario and did better than last year, but you know there were some parts that I feel like I didn't quite get right. So again, not going to be an amazing score. Um, yeah, then did some food and beer pairing, a couple of food and beer things, and did styles. And then there was one that the other process and ingredients one that was just like, it was one that I think maybe we had predicted like a part of it, like we thought maybe that subject matter would come up, but the rest of it, I mean, could not have been teed up for me any
Yeah.
better on a process and ingredient thing. I mean, went into the brew house and was just like, oh my god, like you have to absolutely kill this thing. You
Just another
cannot
day
leave.
at the office,
Yeah, you
right?
just cannot leave anything on the table. And I felt really good about that one. I felt like every time I said something, the proctor was like, we're gonna get to that. Like that's so I felt like I was kind of talking about what the natural kind of next thing was. And so I'm hoping that kind of comes across as like some confidence and mastery of the subject matter. Um, yeah, and then the last keeping and serving was with Jen, and that one I just there's maybe the style one from that day, maybe one of the styles from that day. I maybe want that one back, but I probably want that one back too because I was just so embarrassed. I was just like, oh my god, like I just did there. Like Chris said, last year there were times where again you wanted to be like, look, like I'm not an idiot. I am just panicking. Like
Yeah.
that's all that's happening here.
I'm just a
Swear I
human with
prepared for this.
emotions.
Like I know I just and but it just didn't and part of it was like some things I hadn't quite there. It's it's stuff you've heard about. That's the thing that's probably if you're preparing for this exam, you're probably not going to be asked about anything that you just plumb have never heard of before, but you might be asked to do or interact with something that you've never used before. and
Yeah. Yeah.
that's just far more likely for whatever reasons. It could be whether that's just access to certain things if you're from a different country and you just don't have access to whatever it is, whether it's a commercial example or equipment or food or whatever it could be. I think they do their best to not sort of let that be a thing, but also like it's in the syllabus, and so you just got to be that's part of it. It was more than fair. It was not like anything that was outside of the parameters, but just especially with Jen, it just wanted to do well, and it just didn't. Yeah, just so that one I wasn't super happy with, but felt like the beer and food stuff went well enough. One of the process and ingredients, stuff went well. The style one, I would kind of want that one. So day two oral exams was definitely not as good as day one. Still feel like I'm in the like low 80th, percentile, low 80s, maybe 80, 81, where it's like recoverable.
Mhm.
But yeah, not day two was not ideal for a couple of those. So hoping I'm just being a little hard on myself.
Yeah, yeah. I've spent some time being hard on myself about the day two stuff as well. I think I again sustained a pretty high average over the oral exams, which is nice. But you think about these little things here and there, and it's like you're not sure if that was worth 2 points or 8 points, and all of a sudden what you thought was in the 94 range, it's like, well, maybe I just got like an 85, which is a great score, but it's like you're looking for
But yeah,
90 plus
anytime,
wherever you can possibly bank it.
yeah. Because whenever
Um,
when Chris built this thing last year, where we just plug in the subjects, plug in all of our scores that we think we got, when you kind of do everything and you're just wondering where can I kind of be a little bit more generous with some points, points are just hard to come by. They're
yep.
just so difficult to come by in a realistic way. Obviously, you could just write in whatever number, but especially after last year, because I think at some point it's like, well, you don't know how they grade, but last year we also got the idea of like, this is how I felt going out of it, and this is what I got in those matched, and this is how I felt going out of it, and that was a reality check. And so
Hmm.
now it's kind of a little bit more of like, oh, okay, that actually kind of seemed more like last year's oral exam on that, similar subject matter. And so I'm going to go with a similar, kind of score. Um, but they're just tough to come by. They're just so tough to come by.
Yep, they are, and I think it just echoes, Brian Reed's point that he gave us many years ago at this point when we were thinking about taking this exam, and it's just there's not many places to hide. You just kind of got to be good at everything, and it's really, really hard to make up for lost points. If you can sustain an 85, 86, and you're just kind of humming along, you're going to do really, really well. But if you throw one really,
43.
really bad essay or oral exam, it's just so difficult to claw your way back. And so, yeah, so fast forwarding for day two, it repeats day one. We're done with our oral exams. We have two tasting panels before lunch. Those were another off flavor tasting panel, and then beer styles, our favorite. Um, Beer styles went better this year than it did last year. Still shocking how hard that can be in the moment and what silly mistakes that you can make. But yeah, I only got one right on that panel last year, and I got 5 out of 7 this year, and maybe scrounge a little extra credit on one of the samples. One of the samples, if I told you what I said it was, you'd be like, "Have you ever tasted beer in your life?"
Yeah, yeah. Because I got 2 right on the style panel last year, and I got 3 right. And one of them, we both guessed the same one, and we were really, really close. So
Yeah,
we'll get some good credit on some good extra or kind of partial credit on that one. And then yeah, a couple of them, yeah, I just in the moment just did not. Yeah, just like we said before, that was the moment where it was just like, just that never crossed my mind. And when people were telling me that's what they put in, it was the correct answer, in my head I was like, wow, like, okay, like I was like, I would bet against that, and I would have been wrong.
yeah.
So yeah. So yeah,
Uh,
a couple more. So it was styles and or no, it was off flavor styles, and then we did essays for the next day. So again, like Chris said, this is like flavor compounds, beer, process and ingredients, and then some beer and food pairing stuff. And this is where last year, we both definitely would have wanted a little bit more time to do beer and food pairing stuff. How did you fare this year with your time management?
Yeah, so this year what I did was I took a peek at all the questions at the beginning. Totally legitimate and allowed to do that. Just don't want to waste too much time reading through the questions before you start answering. And I what the way it was organized is it was questions 1 and 2, and then from questions 3 to 7, those are the ingredient and process essays, and that was the little packet of 5 that you could skip one. And then bringing up the rear of the packet is 2 different beer and food pairing themed oral exam essay questions. And so what I did after glancing at them and kind of developing an idea of some of the things that I wanted to say was I answered 1 and 2, then I skipped the whole ingredients and process packet and went to beer and food because I really, really wanted to improve that score this year. And the danger of doing that, and I fell a little bit into this trap, but not devastatingly so, is that you write about beer and food for too long and you turn your like 86 into an 88 and, pat yourself on the back and then drop a bunch of stuff on another essay. And it's like, oh shit, I didn't really think that through, did I? So nothing that devastating happened, but I did I did invest a lot of time in particular on one of the beer and food essays that I really wanted to improve from last year. So hopefully that pays dividends in that section because that's one of my favorites. We've talked about that so much on the channel, and we're developing a lot of independent ideas for it, and it's one of the most fun things. But the harsh reality is you got to get to the other stuff. And so I got to that packet of 5 just after the halfway mark. So I had less than half of the time for the final, to me, 4 essays. I met my goal of not skipping the essay that was about water. So I answered that one, and I ended up making the choice to skip one, to skip a different one that was a little bit more modern information being asked about one of the ingredients, and felt a little bit more involved than I wanted to be. And I think you used the same reasoning, but you did skip a different essay. So to each
I
his or
did,
her own,
yeah.
you know what I mean?
Well, because that was one that I had for a long time thought was going to be was just going to be touched on somewhere. I didn't think I
Yeah.
when I saw that it was an essay on its own, I was like, oh, I was licking my chops. I was like, we're definitely not skipping that one. And I had the same goal as you. I did it last year, and that paid off. That was a really good, essay from process. Did not skip the water one. But I kind of used the same strategy of like, well, there was actually, and honestly, there was another process one where I was like, I studied a ton for that. It was one of my favorite things to study. I was like, I'm not skipping that one. And so it was really only down to two, two different ones, and comparing those two, just seeing the amount of sections that one of them had, and just how quickly I thought I could answer, the first 2 sections of the other one. It was pretty quickly. If I was forced to answer all 5 of them, I would not have panicked by any means, because I think we were prepared for the one that I skipped. But it just turned into like, I want to, because kind of to kind of the opposite with you. I did not look through the packet because I saw the first 2 questions and I was like, I know this stuff like the back of my hand. I think, in my head, I was like, this is the stuff you wanted to get. So I immediately just started writing. Question 1, just started writing, started getting after it. Finished those 2 relatively quickly, and then basically for after that, I think I kind of looked through, but then again, like the next 2 were the water question and the one that you were talking about that you skipped, and I was like, well, I already said I'm not going to skip either of these, so I'm not going to stop. I'll just decide, which other one I'm gonna skip, because I just couldn't imagine anything being sort of more being more prepared for something else.
Yeah.
And then it was kind of the same thing. I turned over the next page. I knew I was going to answer one of those questions, and then it was like just turn the next page, and it was like, oh, okay, like this one has 3 sections, and I kind of already have an idea of what I'd say for the first two, and this one, I was like, this is just a lot to read and try and make sure I've figured out, and so I was like, I think that's going to save me the most time, and so I'm just gonna skip that one, and ended up getting through all of the answers for my first 6 questions, and I had about 85-90 minutes. So basically had like 45 minutes, about 45 minutes per beer and food pairing essay. So got to really, last year it was just kind of like, well, like these are the commercial examples I'm going to do. This is the other beer I'm going to choose, and that's just what I have time to think about. And so that's what we're going to do. And so I really got to kind of, sit and think. I even think you said you kind of had glanced over at one point, and you were just kind of like, yeah, I was wondering, like, what is he just sitting there and just thinking? What is he doing? Just thinking and not writing? What is going on? But it was because I actually felt like I had some time to do that. And so really was trying to think about the feedback that I got last year. Really trying to read through the question. Feels like last year I maybe misinterpreted, the essay question that they gave. And so I was just really trying to make sure that I was, answering, what they were asking me. And, I don't know. But then I took the time and I got done with it. And I was like, man, if I just, if I maybe, I don't know, there was just part of me that was like, that felt like that should have been a little bit more difficult or grueling, kind of, because I didn't do so well last year. And maybe I just didn't have a whole lot as much to make up as I thought. But I don't know. I got done with that. And then I think I got done with both of those in about 70 minutes. And then I had about 15 minutes left, and I just went and did a bunch of double checking. There was one of the first two essays I was like, I forgot one like fact that I would want to add, double checked a couple of other things and made sure I had met some of the requirements. So kind of got to go back and add a few things, and kind of like you said, put the little cherry on top, or just make sure you're including some of the basic stuff. And so the good thing is, if you want to feel a lot better about any part of the exam after after the exam, like if you're feeling pretty good about both days worth of essays, like that's where you want to feel pretty good,
Mm-hmm.
because that's where if you're trying to find points, the best place to find them is on the essays, because that's where it's kind of weighted the most. It's 58% of the 58% of the total score, and then it's 27% for oral exams, and then the rest is for the tasting exam. So yeah, even though I had one day with the orals where, again, didn't feel like I bombed, but didn't really feel like I was kind of at that like 85 plus average, kind of felt like the next day maybe could have was a little bit better than the 85 range, and so hoping those kind of average out to like a 83 and a half, 84, and then just kind of be above 85 for essays, like even if I'm just at 86 flat, that should kind of even things out there. Yeah, I mean, one thing we've told people is that I know this is true for me. Uh, Besides just getting to sit down and say you can just write 8 essays about whatever you want, as long as they're from the knowledge areas and it's to the master level, for a random set of questions across 2 days, I don't know if it could get any better than this. For myself, I don't know how you feel about that.
No, I mean, I felt very similarly, and we've had a few days to chat about it, and definitely think this was a good version of the exam for us to pass.
Yeah, this is
So
gettable. Yeah,
it's
this one
it's a,
was.
it's gettable. I think looking and listening back on our attempt last year felt like delirium. We didn't have anything to compare it to. We thought we did way better than we actually did. Now we have just more information about the likely scores that you can get based on how you felt about how you answered some things. And I just feel so much better. I'm not saying that I definitely passed or anything. I'm just saying that the comfort level is so much different. Um, it's difficult to explain, and we might not even be right, the difference between how much of it was subject material that happened to be more in our wheelhouse and or predicted versus, well, we also studied for an extra year,
Yeah.
gained much more comfort level with a bunch of the material. I remember super vividly talking about my experience last year and just saying, really, the difference between previous levels and this one is you don't have a whole lot of time to think and remember things. It has to be very instinctual. You have to have studied it so much that it's second nature and you can just go. And I think the way that you answered the essay questions kind of proves that you put in the work in order to make it that way. So that's not to say that this exam was a perfect version of the exam by chance. If we have to take it again, I
No.
think that exam could likely feel like a really good version to pass for us as well, because
Right.
we will have prepared for it.
Right.
There are many more known knowns going into your subsequent attempts on the exams. So that's great. I felt super great about it. The After the essays on day 2, it's sort of like you're running a 10K and you feel like the last 100 yards is left, but there's actually like a mile left because there are 2 more tasting panels.
Yeah.
And so you feel like you should be done, but you have a lot further to run.
Yeah.
And so those last 2 tasting panels are tough because you are just obliterated, so tired, hand hurting. One of them's another technical panel, so you have to write a bunch about 4 beers. And
And then the other one's the hardest non-technical panel. Yeah, it's the
yeah, that's
flavor
the one where they
description.
they spike with flavor compounds that are nowhere to be found on the syllabus, and you're supposed to be able to describe the aroma and flavor that you're getting. And so yeah, they're both tough for different reasons. But yeah, and then you're finally done.
Yeah.
You actually run that last mile, and then you're finally done. And then ceremonial Malort shot.
Yep.
I mean, I just feel like that exam is the mental version of like a Tough Mudder or something, just this like really grueling race. So I mean, the timer goes off and I went and hugged you, and then I went and hugged Lauren, and I literally hugged and shook hands with every person that took the exam, because you know what? We all did the damn thing just now. We
Yeah.
did it. We finished it. Um, Irrespective of what the scores end up being, you should be super proud of yourself for accomplishing such a feat. And it felt good to finish it again. It's a lot of the exam is really fun to take. It's been a personal challenge for us more than just about anything, and so it's like climbing a mountain or running that race. And I think the metaphor holds in racing how well you need to perform in order to pass this exam. I think you need to be nearing your personal best to
Yeah.
pass this kind of exam. And so I felt like I was close. We can take a moment to talk about kind of where we think our scores might be. This will also change 100 times before we actually get the phone call.
It's
So
already
don't
changed. Yeah. You're
don't yeah don't take any of this as gospel. Um but yeah, I felt so good, and already have started the operation nitpick about different things that I
Mhm.
could have added to essays. I have a penchant for like waxing a little more poetically when I need to be technical, so we'll see if I did that in more places than I wanted to, um and things like that. But yeah, we finished. We felt pretty good. Had our Malort shot. We had our kind of half hour when we went down to the tap room where we
Well,
debriefed
they
each
go
other about
over
the
well, they
exam.
go over
Oh yeah,
the
thank you.
tasting. Yeah, they tell you at the end. They start with whoever put together the tasting exam for day one. Okay, so Jen, what it would tell them all the beers. Okay, this is what the off flavors were. This is what the consumer beers were. Which one of those we fucking nailed it.
Yep.
We did really good on one of them, so I'm hoping our score improves from last year on consumer. But yeah, so they go through all of that, and then they go through the next day, and we're trying to remember, what they were. So if we can kind of, look up the beers and see see what's in them, or see how they're, produced or what have you. Because that's when you're trying to figure out your score, like especially for things like off flavors, like that's where it's just like there's going to be objective points, like unless something
Yeah.
outrageous happens where everybody gets it wrong and something happened with the spike, they can adjust accordingly. But that didn't happen last year, so it doesn't really seem like it happens too often. So yeah, those are always really nice. And after hearing all of the beers and kind of going through all of it, I think I still did fine on the tasting. I don't think it's gonna be the reason I don't pass, but there's also, I feel like I'm close enough where it's like, is it gonna be like, wow, if I plug in my score from my tasting score from last year into this year, like would that have gotten me over the hump if I had just kind of just stayed the same? So because there were a couple places where I felt like I did better, but those were subjective. A couple of the one objective area I did slightly, we're not astronomically, but for something like a off flavor panel, I mean, if you missing none is 100 and missing 2 is a 75. I mean, you just don't. There's not, each sample is just worth such a high percentage for those things. But yeah, I'm just kind of hoping maybe I went down a couple of points, at the most. And yeah, I mean, I think I'm kind of, the thing is, I would just be completely beside myself if I didn't improve from last year. If that happened, I just like need to like have I need to just have like do some serious soul searching, because I just feel like so many things went better. But again, like I mean, I don't know if you did this, and I don't necessarily recommend it, but I mean, it's just, I felt like I needed to do it, and I did. I just wrote down all the things that I wish I would have said, and just kind of trying to help to put things into a little bit better perspective. And so, I'm really, obviously I'd be completely stunned if I got higher than 85. But I basically think I'm kind of in the like 83 to 85 range. Like, I think I've got a shot. Again, like a lot of subjects on this that I feel confident about, but it's just going to kind of depend on if I, talked about some stuff that they wanted to hear. And like you said, got technical where they wanted you to get technical. And sometimes you just don't, you don't know how much to read between the lines, and that can be challenging. So
yeah, they, and to be clear, they just reveal all the beers that were on the tasting exam at the end. You don't know jack shit about how they're going to grade
no,
the
God, the
essays,
orals
the
and everything.
oral exams.
Yeah.
There
For
are
the
some
oral
beer
exams, they do.
samples.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, there are some beer samples on a few of the oral exams, so
Yeah.
you know where you got some little points there, and kind of can confirm how you did overall, how you were kind of vibing on those. Because for those that don't know, for like a beer style oral exam, they'll ask you about a style, have you compare it to another style. You have to do all the vital statistics and all that stuff, and then at the end they'll hand you a sample of beer, and they'll just say, "Is this a good example of that style or not?" So that one's always that's the most fun reveal to me, because it's like, is it? We're all like, "What did you say? What did you say?" But to put a finer point on it, I had a bad showing on the off flavors again this year. I got basically somewhere around a 60%, like with the 3 off flavor panels combined. And so, but I think I did extremely well on a couple of the descriptive panels. Did so much better on styles that I think that drags the tasting score maybe up into the realm of like 73 to 75, which is not a spectacular tasting score. But friendly reminder, I'm putting my positivity hat on right now, that part of the exam is worth 15% of the overall grade. So you can dramatically boost your score comparatively in the essays and orals. And I really, really think I sustained a very high average on the oral exams. essays will be remain to be seen. That's the part where there are probably places I could have been more technical and more organized, but I don't feel like I missed anything super huge. And I think I grubbed for a lot of points on the keeping and serving stuff. So there is a world in which I pass. I think I'm kind of in that 82-ish range. And if some things break my way, we could be talking about a passing grade. It's just really difficult to find enough points to make up for that likely tasting score. So that's the thing that I'm kind of dealing with right now. And trust me, there are some avenues. Like I crunched the numbers already, and there are plausible scenarios in which I eked by a passing score. But the real moral of the story is substantially better than last year, regardless of what the score comes back. I mean, last year's score was shocking to me, and most of that was ignorance on my part. I have a much clearer head in thinking about the exam this year, and the results, and a better memory of what I said, and better knowledge of how it might be graded. And so, yeah, no, I feel like I'm in the hunt. Feels like nearing the cutoff line. And I think that the exam is just sort of designed that way. Like, we don't know what everybody that's passed has gotten, but you don't hear people being like, yeah, I got a 90 average. I just murdered the Master Cicerone exam. No, they're like, I got a 84.98, and I,
Yeah.
I passed the exam, or like a
I was like,
85.3.
yeah, I was like, literally, I think 99% of people are just, they treat it as pass fail. It's not
Yeah,
a.
yeah,
So, and to kind of reiterate what Chris was saying, unlike the certified and the advanced exam, there is no minimum tasting score that you have to
yeah.
get for the master exam. So, you can have an off day, but have an even, because it's not impossible to be in the higher percentage. There are master cicerones who have passed who have gotten 90%, on the oral exam portion. So
Hmm.
it's not out of the realm of possibility. So yeah, it's not like you can just do so well on both of those things, but then they're like, yeah, but you just didn't get a 75. That doesn't
Hmm.
happen. So,
Yeah.
and then I think one, unless stop me unless you want to talk about anything else, but I think one thing we really wanted to touch on was just kind of being surprised that there was only 7 people at the exam, and we definitely talked about it. We kind of talked about it afterwards, and I know at least we know at least one person was kind of in it, but then kind of changed their mind at the end because they got really busy, and I think they were moving and starting a new job, and life kind of happened, and that happens to people. And I know of one person who's pretty committed to taking it next year, and they kind of thought about doing it this year, but decided to kind of eschew till next year. Which I'm always, if you feel like you've got to take that extra time, I'm a big fan of doing that. I did that, and I think that paid off a lot. Um, so what's your kind of take on that? Like only having 7 people at the exam.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've talked a lot about the history of the program with each other. And I think it's just interesting that, a lot of, well, let me put this on the table. Scott and I are self-taught in the sense that we have sought out mentorship and paid for experiences, obviously, but we do not have the backing monetary wise of our employers or anonymous wealthy benefactors. Nothing. We paid for all of this on our own, with humble salaries, so we
Yeah.
get it.
We were not oil tycoons in our previous careers. Yeah, it's just
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
nothing like that.
Yeah. um yeah, you're talking to former, teacher and pastor. We're not exactly like
Yeah.
rolling in cash. So, um, but and we don't work for large breweries with a bunch of resources at their disposal. And none of that's like victim or woe is me story. I just, more people like us, I want to attempt this exam. I don't want people to think that you need to work for an international conglomerate, or you need to have 15 years experience in the industry, or you need to have been a draft technician, or you need to have a PhD in chemistry. We don't have any of those things, and we are making a show of it at these exams. And so I implore other folks, if you've been on the fence about it and you just like think it's out of reach for some reason, I promise you that it's not. And if you take your time and study wisely, and put a schedule to it, and go through the syllabus, and reach out to people too, you'd be surprised. You're going to get a lot of no's. People don't have time to just help you pass the Master Cicerone exam, of their own, good spirits, but they and goodwill. But you're going to get some yeses too, and you're going to get little bits of information and little bits of help, and you don't have to spend as much money as we did on all the flavor compounds or whatever. You can study some stuff your own way and get different experiences. But the point is, this world needs more Master Cicerones. I mean, there are only 28 when you think about how absurdly low of a number that is. And the advanced level, that's reaching up there. We cracked 200 this year, which is incredible. I'd like to see that number keep going up and up and up. Level 2 certified Cicerone, we're nearing 5,000 or something like that. And when people think that that's a high number of certified Cicerones in the world, I might add, it's not. We have
Yeah. We don't
like
even have enough for.
9,000 breweries in this country,
I was
so
gonna say we don't have enough cicerones for
we don't
each
have enough
brewery to have
Cicerones
one.
for
Yeah,
every brewery to
yeah,
have one. And the more people that attain this certification, or that reach for it, even if you fail, you've learned so much, and you've made beer a better industry to be in. You've contributed to the quality, the camaraderie, and just the overall, awesomeness of this beverage that we love, just by pursuing it. And so, yeah, just freaking go for it. Like, and reach out to us. Like, we might not be able to answer everything, and we haven't even passed yet. So, what the hell do we know? But what we do know is that, we need more people going for it. And I want to see the next exam. If we have to be there, I want to see 15 plus people there. And we need to be punishing these graders, giving them a few extra essays to grade, and and really going for it. So yeah, just I think the industry itself is maturing. Lots of breweries are closing, fewer are opening. There's lots of consolidation happening. I don't think beer's not dead by any means. It's a it's a beverage. It's a cultural institution that definitely will not die. But we need more. We need as many stewards of the beverage as we could possibly get. So go for it. Reach for the stars. Let's do it. Let's get more people signing up for this exam.
yeah. Because I mean, it would just be. It would be a shame if we, because I mean, first off, nobody passed last year, and the cohort got smaller. So
Yeah.
usually the cohort might get smaller just because you're thinking, oh well, of course it got smaller because last year the other year 6 people passed. It's like, well, yeah, you would hope that you would think that would happen, but I don't want to think that if 1 or 2 people, kind of, which is kind of more of a normal number, uh, pass, then it's just going to be like the cohort that was like right after COVID, or like like
Right.
they're we don't want anything like that, and you're gonna learn stuff, and not to say that you're not gonna have to push yourself a little bit. I know on in many places Cicerone has said, we're not trying to turn people into beer scientists, but it also doesn't mean you can't you can't learn what esterification is. When
Yep.
you're talking and kind of understanding what that is, you're gonna have to, in some way. I mean, the exam's just too vast. You're gonna have to push yourself, even if you are a scientist. You might just not have a clue when it comes to keeping and serving, or you might just not be, you might just be like, I just make like basic food, and I meal prep, and I eat the same thing every day for dinner, like so beer and food might not, there's I mean, just previous study groups that we've talked to, there's just always something that somebody, it was kind of their thing that they had to kind of really hone in on and choose to get better at. And you're going to find that, and you're going to be really happy that you did. You're going to
Mhm.
become more valuable to the place that you work. You're also just investing in yourself. I think that's something when I get that question a lot, especially working with Beer Scholar. What is the advanced? What does it get me? What does advanced get me? What is master going to get you? And I would encourage you to think not in what is somebody else going to give me when I get this, but what are you then going to be able to do for yourself? Maybe you
Yep.
want to write a book. Maybe you want to, start, a publication, like David Nielsen does, and Final Gravity. Maybe you want to start something like that. Maybe you want to, whatever it is, it's going to give you more credibility. It's going to make you more knowledgeable. My God, if I would have, I mean, the example I used from my own story is I got asked to lead a beer and food pairing dinner where a restaurant and a brewery were partnering with each other, and I was certified. And it was probably, I think it was like maybe like 6 weeks before the pandemic, like was when I got invited to do it. I said yes. The pandemic started. I studied for advanced, and after I passed advanced, I was so glad that I did not lead that beer dinner because I really would have been way in over my head. Like I thought
Yep.
I knew a way more than I did. I was so happy, and now I would be more than happy to do something like that and would feel far more confident. And that's the thing you realize, the higher and higher you go, it's the more that you learn, but also you realize that there's just a whole lot that you really don't know. And to me, that just means there's something else for you to get excited about, something to be interested in. Beer is always changing. Beer is always, we're always discovering new things, finding new things, making new things. And hopefully those things lead to new styles, experiences, whatever it is. And we just need more people who are, Master Cicerones are some of the greatest ambassadors, for beer, and we need a lot more of them, and that's why we're trying to do it. We're trying to show that your sort of average person can kind of make their way to this. I mean, the fact that I found out that I passed certified in January of 2020, and it's 2025, and I'm going to find out probably right around 2026 whether or not I feel like I have a legitimate shot. It's no guarantee, but I have a better shot than last year, and I got a 79. And so I mean there's only 6 more percentage points to make up, and so it's like there's even, I feel like my shot's even better, and to be saying that is wild to me. And it just proves that there's just a lot you can do to, and if anything, I'll just know that I've improved even more
Yep.
this year, and I'll be, like Chris said, we'll be even more ready for next year. And and we'll be ready to take it again if we have to. But reach out to us, message us. Um, if you're thinking about it, just think of it. Just take a day and just think, what would it be like if I did start studying? How would that feel? How would it feel if I
Yep.
made a schedule? If I printed out the syllabus and started highlighting what I really wanted to focus on, and you know, just start reaching
And
out.
there's
And
no good time to take it, right? Stuff comes up. I mean, people have
yeah,
passed this exam under way more strenuous life circumstances than you or I have at this moment. And so
yeah,
start small, maybe study a couple hours a week or whatever, just to kind of like
yeah,
get the ball rolling and get some stuff
yeah,
moving. Um, you can
yeah.
watch
Chip
our
away.
other videos for the power of just doing a little bit of something every week on a schedule adds up so much over time. And maybe you don't take it this next exam, but you take the one after that, and all of a sudden you've had upwards of 80 weeks of study leading up to that exam, even if it was little
Right.
by little. And so, yeah, just imploring you to, if you've been on the fence or even a hard no about leveling up, as our buddy Chris Leguizamon says, um, I implore you to take the next step. The worst thing that can happen is that you don't pass, and then you learned a bunch of cool shit and you met a bunch of awesome people and you're more connected and more knowledgeable, and you're better for it. So
Yeah.
And the best thing that can happen is you pass, which you're probably going to do. So
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah. In terms of what's in the pipeline, I mean, Thanksgiving is coming up, and then Christmas. So probably our next video is going to be us revealing what our scores are. So it'll probably be what the deal is, and so yeah, we'll see. We'll see you all next time, and hopefully we'll be celebrating. That will be the key. So, cheers, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Make sure to like the video. Share this on all your social media platforms, and reach out to us if you're attempting in 2026.
Cheers.
Cheers.